Now it's time to focus on Lesson 2 in Unit 3 on fraction multiplication. This unit expands on this lesson expands on what was taught within Unit or Lesson 1, but we are going to continue with simplifying fractions and understanding how to multiply by a unit fraction. Now, at some points, it does tell you to go offline and get some materials, and this is really important that you follow that learning coach guide and do these activities, because if we don't do these hands-on activities, the concepts can be very abstract. We definitely want kids to participate and model the math as they work out the problems. The numbers themselves can be rather abstract, but when they get to see it and they get to touch it and feel it, and they begin to understand what a fraction really means. So what this is showing us is it says multiply fractions less than or equal to 1. Now right here we have 1/3 times 1, which means that this is the identity property. We have 1/3 one time. It's not going to change. It's still going to be 1/3. But we also want students to understand that 1/1 is also a representation of 1, because the numerator and the denominator are the same. We have 1 of the 1 pieces. We have 2 of the 2 pieces. We have 100 of the 100 pieces. So as you go through this lesson, you will see that it reinforces that even though these numbers look large, they still represent one whole. But then we're going to get into what happens when you multiply a fraction by a fraction. We don't want the whole piece. A fraction is less than a whole, especially if it's not an improper fraction. We can't just say always a fraction is always less than a whole, because it depends on what the numerator and the denominator are. If this was 5/3, that would be more than a whole. But in this example, we only want 1/3 of 1/3. And so they're going to talk about how you can model the math and really see what it means to take 1/3 of 1/3. As you move through the lesson, there's going to be more examples. As you can see, several of these are numbers that are rather large, and they do encourage you to simplify before you work it out. So looking at 3/15, I automatically know that 3 can go into both of those. 15 is divisible by 3, and 3 is divisible by 3. So if I divide the numerator and the denominator by 3/3, I will get 1/5, which is much easier to calculate with. So as you go through this, you'll continue to work out problems and find the least or the simplify it so that the numbers are a little bit easier. Now this is one of my favorite things. It says model multiplying 1/5 times 2/3. And I'm going to show you this with the document camera as well. So if we have 1/5 times 2/3, you can see that they've divided this strip into thirds, and they have marked 2/3. But we only want 1/5 of that. So then what they're going to do is go across. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups, or divided into fifth. And if they take one of those fifths, see how they marked across all the way? So they have 2/3 in blue and 1/5 in red. So all of the pieces, now that they've divided up, there's 15 in all, and you have to look at the overlapping part. If we have 1/5 of 2/3, we only have 2/15. And so you can see the answer up here. Now I'm going to show you some of this with my document camera. So let's say we have a fraction like this, and we have 3/4. And so I'll write that right here. We have 3/4. But let's say we only want 1/2 of that. So I'm going to use my overlay, and here's my half. So I have 3/4 times 1/2. If I only want half of 3/4, I can lay those over, and you can see where they overlap because my blue and yellow turn to green. When I count all the pieces, I have 4 and 4, or 8 total pieces. And how many are overlapped? When I have my yellow and my blue that turns green, you can see that I have 3 of the 8 pieces, or 3/8. Let's try another one. This time, let's take half of a half. So we'll multiply 1/2 times 1/2. Now when we multiply a fraction by a fraction, our number or area is going to get smaller. And this is only true if we're multiplying by a fraction that's less than 1. Both of these are fractions less than 1. You can see that it's not the entire piece. So if I have 1/2 divided by 1/2, I now have 4 pieces, and they overlap in one area. And you can see here's my half, but I only want 1/2 of that, which would be this part right here. Half of a half is 1/4. I know that most of you do not have materials like this, but you can use wax paper, or I've even heard that you can get the liners that go in between hamburger patties at a restaurant supply store and color them in. You could also use tracing paper to color in and model the math. You can also just simply do as they did in the OLS. Okay, here's my half. You could think about the other half, but you always want to draw it the other way. And then if we have this one half this way and this one a half this way, we kind of need to think about how they would overlap. And so move this one on top, and I'm going to actually make those lines. And it's good to use different colors like we did with these little bars right here. When you overlay different colors, it definitely works a lot better. So if I overlap that and I have my lines going this way, you can see my 1/4 right there in the corner. So this unit basically does just reinforce what it means to take a fraction of a fraction. And as you go through, there will be an activity in the student guide. So we'll go ahead to page 42. And in this activity guide, and also don't forget that there is the Learning Coach guide that walks you through even more problems and tips on how to be successful with this unit. You can see automatically that some of these fractions need to be simplified. So 2/6, both of these numbers are even, and you could simplify that to 1/3. So what I would do, and I'm going to show you this with my document camera as well. So if we have 2/6 times 1/4 actually, and then they have a box here, and their box, as we can see, has 3 rows this way and 4 rows this way. And the reason they only have 3 is because they simplified that fraction first. Because I know that if I divide the numerator and the denominator by 1, or 2/2, I'm going to get 1/3. So what they have done, and this is a great way to model this without having the fancy manipulatives, you can simply use grid paper and mark off the certain number that you need. So I'm going to show 1/3 like this. I have one of the 3 pieces. So here's 1, 2, 3. I have one of those 3 colored in like that. Then I want to take 1/4 of those. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So here's my 1/4. 1/4 of this box would look just like this. Where they overlap is the answer. We have a circle and an X. So we have how many pieces in all? We have 4, 8, 12. I have one of the 12. Now, if we had multiplied with the standard algorithm, we would have seen that we have 2/24, which simplifies to 1/12. You will be coming across problems where you will use the standard algorithm, and if we had used this number right here that we had already simplified, 1/3 times 1/4, you would see that we have 1/12. So it's best to simplify first so that the numbers aren't as large. So the same type of problem will be presented. Some of these are a little bit trickier, such as number 2, because it's already shaded in, and you can see the A and B sections are already shaded in. So basically, when you get to something like this, and you see that there's thirds and thirds, and they have 4 shaded in, we really need to think about, okay, let's think about right here, we have, if we had those 2 rows, that would be 2 of the 3, and then the same thing multiplied down, we had 2 of the 3. This is showing the final product where they overlapped. So the answer would be 4/9, and you can see we have 4 of the 9 spaces. What you could do is just take that same drawing and do as before and just complete the entire row. So we have 2/3, and then we have 2/3 going this way, and you can still see that there's 4 of the 9th that have both shaded in. So it is a little tricky to see it after the fact without all the other things, but it is very doable, and that's why the scratch paper and journaling is very important. What we want students to do when they come to problems like this with number 3 is to really look at those fractions. 6/6 is the same as 1 whole. 8/8 is the same as 1 whole. So that fraction is not going to change its value. It's going to keep the same. Students may automatically think they need to solve a complicated math problem, but they really need to look at those fractions carefully to see what they represent. Now, the next recording is going to go into fractions that multiply with mixed numbers, but what we will do is go ahead and take a peek at the checkpoint before we head into that next lesson, and you can see the same types of problems that were presented right inside the OLS, making sure that students remember that when you multiply by all of the pieces, all 9 of the 9, you're multiplying by 1, so that's the identity property, and it is going to stay the same value. Here is where they've taken 1/2, but what if they multiplied 1/2 by? Just pretend that entire row was colored in, and then think about how many this way were colored in. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 6 of the 8 pieces this way colored in. So you could draw in and finish that model to show what the answer would represent. Here's another one where you can draw a grid on your own and use the even circles and X's, or make it with the transparency paper. And then those are the only questions that are in the checkpoint. So hopefully this helps you be successful with fraction multiplication lesson B.